Okay, hello again. This is the sequel to the other video about setting up Blender for real-time textures, and now we're going to do roughly the same thing, but for using the cycles renderer. So this is not for real-time, but it's to do the same kind of things we're doing with cycles. Opening the same file. This time I'm going to set up, put this in the cycles renderer. I'm going to open this panel here to set up a node editor window, and selecting this object, going to the panel, the material panel, create a new one. Since we're in the cycles render mode, the material we create is by default a cycles material. So the first thing to do is to add a texture node. Add texture, image texture. Okay, connect that here to our diffuse shader. Open, break. Okay, put this into render mode. Maybe we're lacking a light, or our light is not strong enough. So there is one light. We'll make it a cycles light by pressing use nodes in its once I have a light selected, I can go into its light panel, and since I'm using nodes now, I can set its strength. Let's say 500. Let's say 2000. Ha! Much better. Okay, selecting the ball. Okay, so this is nice, but now I want some bump. In Blender, in this shader, in cycles, sorry, the bump will come in here as a normal information. The alternative is using displacement, which will actually push the pixels outwards. But let's just do the traditional bump for now. Add texture, image texture. Open, brick bump. Okay. As you can see, the color output is not the same. Node connection here is not the same color as the normal input. This is because this outputs RGB color information, and this is looking for vector information. So in between, we're going to put a vector, a bump node, which will convert the color into normals. Here we go. It's actually pretty good. Okay, nothing much to be done there. If we want to adjust the strength, the distance here, or is what we want to do. But now I want, the last step is to add shininess to this. The problem is our main shader is a diffuse shader, which is not shiny. So we'll need to use to mix two kind of shaders, a glossy one and the diffuse one we have here. So we're going to add another shader. So look at this here, shader, glossy shader. It went outside the scope. This happens because my Windows is too small. And shader, glossy shader here, and I'm gonna leave some space because we're gonna mix, actually I'm gonna mix those two. So instead of connecting directly this one to the material output, in between them I'm gonna use a specific type of shader which is only used for that, and that is a shader, mix shader. Hit that. So I'm going to create a new one. Shader, mix shader. There we go. Okay, we're going to connect this one to the first one, this one to the second one. So now what's happening is we have glossiness, a mix between a glossy shader and a diffuse shader, but it's happening on the whole surface. So our first shader is kind of whitewashed by the second shader. Let's look. If I put it, for example, in bright green, we'll see that it tints green, and I can transition between both of them. But I don't want a full transition. I want a transition only for only where the goo is. So we're going to use a texture, add input texture, and of course we're going to use our glossiness texture, and we'll use this as the mixing factor. So as you can see, my shininess is only happening in here, but the color here is not the color I'm looking for, because my shader is actually just white. So in fact I could, since I'm just looking for one color, I could simply put that shader of a specific color, or I could input my texture, that same image texture, in here. And so this is the exact color of my texture. And here we are. So let's take a look at that mix. Maybe I should put this up there to clarify. Okay, this is the output, and I'm mixing two shaders, the diffuse shader and the glossy shader. Both are using the same color texture. This one, and actually they should be using maybe the same bump texture as well. So this one is bump, this is the bump texture. I need to convert it to a normal information before I use them here. And the mix shader is guided by our glossiness texture. And here we are. Oops, I clicked invert here. Isn't that great? That's how you do it, folks.